First of all, I'd just like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Indigenous Cultural Heritage Management Plan that Heather and I have prepared in consultation with the local Aboriginal Land Council, the Nowra Local Aboriginal Land Council. So this perspective I'm giving is not an Aboriginal perspective, it's more of a scientific perspective. An Aboriginal person talking about this country would say different things from me, but there is a high degree of overlap, I believe. But what we did was look at the Aboriginal heritage values in the context of the statutory regulations and the legislation in New South Wales that protects Aboriginal heritage. So our project tasks were to record the evidence of pre-contact Aboriginal occupation, which is archaeological sites, to review the historical records of Aboriginal presence in the region, which is archival research, the sort of work that Michael Organ's been doing for a long time, to consult with the Nowra Land Council and also with Trust staff who have a lot of anecdotal information, and I'd particularly like to thank Jim Wallace in that respect. And our job was to identify and assess significant Indigenous places and landscapes and then to provide recommendations. But the idea of this is to show you, and this is really important in understanding Aboriginal connection with place, is that we're on a transition zone. You've got the flat coast, you've got the ocean, you've got the flat coastal plain, and then you rise up into this rugged interior. Now, up till not very long ago, there was a strong belief in southeastern Australia that all Aboriginal people lived on the coast. This was based on the archaeological evidence and that people didn't really go into that scary hinterland very much at all. Now, all those theories have been well and truly debunked as a result of the forest research that's been going on over quite a long period of time. But we do seem to be, the three properties seem to be on this transition zone, and I think that's an important point to understand. We're also at the tidal limit. So when you're thinking of the resources that Aboriginal people would have been using, you're at the tidal limit of the saltwater coming up at round about Burrier. So what sort of resources are in that really transitional zone between saltwater and fresh water? So let's look at the cultural setting. Now, there's many ways of interpreting the past, as we all know. So I'm going to give you the interpretation based on the archaeological and archival evidence. So we know from an excavation at a rock shelter at Bomaderry Creek that people have been living in this area for around about 2,000 years. That's the oldest date we've had from this particular region. We know that Aboriginal people have been here on the south coast for 20,000 years, but this particular place at Bomaderry Creek, it's been about 2,000 years. That traditional life was based on hunting, gathering and fishing by mobile family groups, and that the land was managed using fire and also with the replanting of certain species. So there's some evidence that burrawang seeds were taken from one place and planted in another. We know that the diet was determined by the seasons, and that fish, just based on ethnographic observations, fish were important, as well as plant foods and a range of marsupial species. And this is based on the animal bones that were found at the Bomaderry Creek rock shelter. The river was used for travel with canoes made from the bark of certain eucalyptus species, and also with rafts made from the trunks of the cabbage tree palm. And those observations have been from the Shoalhaven River itself. We know it's a sacred landscape, representing the activities of the creation beings during the dream, what white people call the dream time. And there is a story that links an amazing story that links the beginning of the Shoalhaven River up in Braidwood, that links the Shoalhaven River at its headwaters to where it comes out here at the mouth, down here at Nowra, at Shoalhaven Heads, linking it to one of the cave painting sites at Mundamia, just down the road. So those stories are still passed on in people's memories. We know that customary law, kinship structure and cultural traditions determined behaviour, including the relationships between people and between people and the land and water. When people read, people are always, it's often contested about what's a tribe, what's a family, and it seems that most of the observations by early explorers and settlers, they talked about these big groups of people. So there was developed an understanding that was kind of how Aboriginal people lived, in these big groups. But those big groups probably represented intertribal gatherings rather than the more kind of functional clan group, which is like an extended family. And it was those groups that actually owned the land and had responsibility for a particular parcel of land. There's a big discussion about who's Wadi Wadi and who's Wandanian, and it depends who you read and also who you talk to. So Tyndale, in his early records from 1904, said that the Shoalhaven River was a boundary between the Wadi Wadi people to the north and the Wandanian people to the south. These are not languages, these are functional social groups. But there's no records of battles between these groups, and like the Murray River, the Shoalhaven may not have been a barrier. So we really don't know. The language spoken was a Dharawal language or a dialect of it, and the boundary between the Dharawal and the Durga is around about Jervis Bay. So Dharawal speakers, and may have been part of this larger Yuin group, depending on where you think the Yuin started. Some people say it started here at the Shoalhaven River, other people say it's up around Port Jackson, and may have been part of the Gurial Yuin or Northern Yuin, and the subgroup Gurungutta Munj. Now, Gurungutta is also another name for Coolangatta Mountain, which is the most sacred place on the south coast, in this part of the south coast. As well as that, there's a division between the coastal Aboriginal people and the inland people, and this is where I think this transitional thing becomes very important. There was also smaller groups, like the records talk about the Burrier Blacks near Erie Park. So there's these small groups which are probably the clan groups. Now, there's a completely alternative explanation in that the Lower Shoalhaven was a particular group that spoke a particular language that was neither Wadi, they were neither Wadi Wadi nor Wandanian nor Yuin. They were called the Mudthang or Tharumba. So that's based on some very early records. Okay, let's envisage this traditional landscape in which Aboriginal people were living a few thousand years ago. The Shoalhaven River had no dams. and we know that it flooded all the time. So on the left-hand side there, you've got an early picture. You've got Coolangatta Mountain, the sacred mountain, really standing up on this flat coastal plain. This is a place really rich in resources. Just imagine that Shoalhaven Delta. All the water birds, the reeds, the plant, the fauna and flora there would have been overwhelming, could have supported very large populations. And you can see from the picture on the right, all those dots are recorded archaeological sites that are held on the National Parks database. So you can see that people are living around the edges of this delta, and they're not living in the delta, they're living on slightly elevated areas of land. So if you look closely at where these sites are recorded, you'll see that they're all on pieces of land that are slightly elevated above the floodplain. So Aboriginal people certainly knew where to choose to live. Then we move into this rugged interior. So here you've got on the left steep valleys and hills of the Shoalhaven Gorge, really, really steep, rugged country. You've also got the river, and in the background there, your Pulpit Rock, also a place of significance to Aboriginal people, as it was to Arthur Boyd. And there at the bottom, bark canoes. That's not the Shoalhaven, that's the Murray River, but I couldn't find a picture of Shoalhaven bark canoes, but a similar sort of thing. So people moved and fished along the river, but they also used this rugged interior, and recent archaeological surveys. So just on that left-hand side, at the top there, where the trees are, there's Aboriginal sites up there. That's really, really steep country. So what people were doing up there, we don't know. Maybe they were moving through. One of the important part of doing the plan was to carry out some archaeological surveys of the properties. So what did we expect to find based on previous research in the area? We expected to find stone artefact scatters, complete with their 20-cent piece on the left-hand side there. Aboriginal men polishing and shaping their stone axes. That's what those things are there. And down there on the left, if you look very carefully, I haven't got a pointer or anything, but you can see 2 lines of stones. So that was a stone arrangement recorded in the early 20th century. It's no longer there, not very far from here. So we thought we might find some of those, and also here the Red Hand Cave, which is also very close to here. Maybe we'd find some rock shelters with paintings in them. So we went marching off into the field with great expectations. The yellow lines are our survey areas. So what we did was, the way archaeological research, survey works is that you look at the different landform units, like Andrew showed you, different types of geology, vegetation, slope aspect, and then try and survey a representative sample of each of those landforms. So we've endeavoured to do that, and those included a very nice trip on a boat from Riversdale through to Erie, up to Burrier. So it doesn't look very much there, but was 3 days of very hard work. But it was fun. And we did that work with Graham Smith from the local Aboriginal Land Council. This is not his country. He married into the local area, but he was amazing in the field, and he was the one that found the broad-headed snake while we were doing our archaeological surveys. So we found very little. We found very little during our surveys. And I don't think this is an artefact of the sampling design. I think this is an actual reflection, because the places we went to are the places there where you would expect to find sites, and there weren't any there. At Bundanon, up on the walking track that goes up behind the amphitheatre, right up at the top of the ridge, in the middle of nowhere, well, quite near the broad-headed snake actually, we found one single axe grinding groove on a piece of sandstone that was sticking out. Now, so axe grooves are always found near water because you need water to do the grinding. No water to be seen for miles. So we're starting to think that maybe axe grooves aren't just axe grooves, but maybe they represent something else as well. So this is some new ideas that have come out of this field work. And, you know, why would you have an axe groove there and not 100 metres away or 50 metres away or somewhere else? So that was very interesting. And down at Haunted Point, which is on the big bend in the river in Bundanon, there's this big open area here which is absolutely high potential for finding stone artefact scatters, because every other river that I've ever surveyed in Australia always has campsites close by above the flood zone. Nothing except this one possible core. So you can see on the right-hand side, you can see it's a piece of some kind of igneous rock that's been flaked. You can see those negative flake scars where some flakes have been taken out, but we didn't find anything else. And at Erie Park, up in this really, really narrow, very difficult to climb creek line, really steep, really, really remote, we suddenly find in the top of this little escarp 3 axe grooves where that pen is. They're not very well defined, but I'm pretty sure they're axe grooves. So again, why would you have axe grooves there? Why would you go into this really, really remote place in this really narrow, difficult to get to creek valley? It's not part of any natural route through. And then close to that, on an old logging road or something, we did find a pebble chopper down at the bottom there. So I think it looks just like a pebble. Well, it is a pebble, but it's got some pitting in it, which suggests it might have been used as an anvil or something like that.